I love doing these kinds of things because when you speak at events like this and conferences like this, you always, as a speaker, you're kind of focused on what you have to offer and what you have to bring. But invariably, you come and you're filled with insight and knowledge and inspiration from all the things you've heard. And that's what I can say for today. It's just amazing what a great day it's been and how much I've learned about this whole field and all the great work that's going on. And I'm just so impressed with the work that Matt and Jeff are doing with Peace Love, and so happy we met a few years ago and excited to see where it goes. Let's see, let me advance this. Okay, so yeah, I work at a comedy theater, but I'm perhaps the least funny man at the comedy theater, or at least maybe the third least funny guy there. There's a recent tally. But by show of hands, how many people here would say they're funny? By show of hands. A few, not too many. How many people here are pretty convinced that you're probably funnier than the person seated to your immediate left? So it's all relative, right? It's all, you don't know, but it's a competition. You might be, you might, who knows? But it's interesting. So yeah, we work at a comedy theater, and I guess my goal in the short time that I have here is to expose you to some of the things that we're doing, some unconventional things we're doing. So beyond the ha-ha side of the business, there's an aha side of the business, and there's an emerging story at the Second City around our role in health and wellness. And I think it's interesting, and it's certainly been kind of a passion thing for us, and want to share it with you today. So you guys, if again, by show of hands, how many people have been to a Second City show? I know we're kind of on the East Coast, so maybe not that many. But you may not know us as a theater, but you probably know the alums who have graced our stages. So folks like Steve Carell and Stephen Colbert in that picture. This is another one. In the nun costume, you've got Rachel Dratch. With the guitar, you've got a young Tina Fey. It's very interesting, and many others who've gone on. This is an interesting one here. Anyone know who that guy in the middle is? Any clue whatsoever? And it's difficult, but Dan Castellaneta, you may not know that name, but you may know him as the voice of Homer Simpson for the last 26 years. So we've been really blessed because we've been called the Harvard of comedy. I'd like to think that Harvard is the Second City of higher education, but they aren't buying that. But we have been the launching pad for stars for 56 years, and it's been a fun run. So 3 goals for today. So that's the side that many people know. That's the tip of a pretty interesting iceberg. And I want to talk about some of the rest of the iceberg here today, another side of the Second City. I want to talk about some core principles of improvisation. So there's the comedy side of what we do, but how we get to comedy at the Second City is through improvisation. And comedy and improv are not synonymous. There's a difference. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the language and ideas of improvisation because they have a lot to do with the language that I've heard today and some of the things that you're all engaged in here. And then invite, if you like what you're hearing and you think that some of this is interesting, to invite further collaboration and exploration. We've been going down this path with the Peace Love folks for the last 3 years. We're excited to see that continue. But even this morning, as I heard some of the other speakers, I was really motivated and fired up because I think there's even more that we can do to help further this very worthy cause and mission that you're all on. So just a little bit about us. If you don't know, we've got stages in Chicago and in Toronto, 56 years in Chicago, about 40 some years in Canada. We've got training centers. We're the largest actor school in the world, over 15,000 students a year going through Chicago, Toronto, and Hollywood. That's anything from the hobbyist, someone just coming in, taking an improv class for fun, to people who are taking it professionally in the conservatory program. The group that I head up, Second City Works, is the business-to-business arm of the Second City. We do about 400 engagements a year. We take improv. It's funny, we've learned that our people, in order to be successful on stage, the skills they need are the same skills that you need to be successful in business. And a lot of those soft skills aren't so soft in the end. the ability to listen, the ability to read a room, the ability to be resilient in the face of failure, to respond to change nimbly, to create trust on dispersed teams. All those things that kind of separate the stars from the also-rans in a professional sense are the things that our people learn and what they're good at. And as I said, there's this emerging thing going on in our company around education and wellness. And we're probing in a few areas, and certainly mental health is an area that we've been going in as well. At the end of the day, I think we're more than a stage, as that headline says. The heart and soul of our company will always be what goes on that stage. That's what draws talent, and that's what brings people to us. But we've really thought about ourselves as more than a theater for the last 10 years or so. And we're really thinking about our mission, which is really to use comedy and improv to improve lives. So it's a much bigger mandate, a much bigger platform for us these days than it was in the past. And you can improve lives through entertainment by just bringing a little joy in the day. And I don't mean to minimize any of that, but we're doing much more than that, and we're really excited about it. Let's see. So a little bit about how do we come to this place? What is this all about? And most people don't know it, but before the funny, there was actually roots in education and social work. On the right side, we see the woman with a group of kids around. This is a woman, probably the matriarch, the grande dame, the head of it all when it comes to improvisation, a woman named Viola Spolin. And Spolin worked in Chicago in the 20s and 30s and worked as an educator and worked in the context of social work. She worked at Jane Addams' Hull House. And she created these theater games to help immigrant kids. The first application was to help immigrant kids who had English as a second language connect better together, to have other ways to communicate and collaborate and to assimilate into a new environment. So long before we got into any of the funny, these games were being used for very different things. In the picture below, improv for stage material, the fella in the center of that picture, and I'm sorry if I'm blocking here, the fellow in the center of that picture is Paul Sills. Sills was Viola Spolin's son. He was a University of Chicago guy, and in the counterculture 50s, there was a burgeoning intellectual movement, kind of a beat movement going on in Chicago, and he and a bunch of other guys formed something called the Compass Players, which was a precursor to the Second City. And they found that Mom's theater games were not just interesting in the context of education, but they could use those theater games to create really interesting content and material for the stage. That was different than the other forms of comedy going on at the time. It was much more biting and satiric and had social commentary attached to it. They were taking on meatier, thornier issues. And we're finding that that comedy was a really good vehicle and a really good way to take on untouchable topics and to take on difficult topics. And so that was kind of the next generation. Obviously, as I mentioned, what's going on in the training center, improv for actors and all the work that we're doing, frankly, to create a pipeline of the next generation of talent for our own purposes, but people who go on to other things as well. And for professional development, the group that I head up again. And this slide is actually, so much of this is, I have to update the slide because, again, the work that we're talking about here and what's germane for the folks here in this room is the work that we're doing in the wellness space. And we'll unpack that just in a second. So we wrote this book, as Matt said, yes and, because we got tired of other people writing books about improv and the applications of it, and we were doing it, but we didn't have time to write a book. So we finally sat down and wrote a book. And improvisers are not good at writing anything down. That's the other thing. So we finally sat down and said, we've been doing this stuff. We've been putting it in practice. We've been seeing the value of it in every sphere, but we haven't really articulated what's going on. My co-author, Kelly Leonard, oversees the theaters. He's the guy that hired all those people in those early days. He's been there 26 years, and he refers to improv as yoga for your social skills. That, there's no place really to practice these skills. And when you think about if you want to get in physical shape, you go to a gym. If you want to do, get intellectually stronger, you might go to a university. But where do you actually go to practice these vital skills? And we've discovered that the stuff that we do, improv really gets at it. So I want to walk through. How are we doing so far? Is this all cool? Good, interesting? Or should I get out of here? All right, cool. So I want to walk through some of these principles and talk a little bit about how we see them. So we wrote the book. It's called Yes and what is yes and? It's the foundational principle of all improvisation. It's the fundamental tenet, the building block of everything. And yes and is this: when two or more actors are on stage and there's no script to drive the action and no idea where a scene goes, those actors need to have some way of understanding how to create that material and how to create something interesting for an audience to watch. And so yes and is this idea that no matter what any person says, it's the job of the rest of the ensemble to accept that or agree with that and add on to it, to affirm and build on an idea. And that's the yes. One actor might say it's a beautiful day out. The other actor might say, yes, and I plan to go ride my bike. And from there, comedy gold like that doesn't come every minute. I just want you to know. So, but the idea is that simple premise, and you know why I am the suit and I'm not on stage, but that simple premise is how we create scenes and characters and entire shows. I'd submit it's how we've created the entire company, by affirming on what's there and building upon it and just yes-anding our way to this multifaceted entertainment and education institution. So most of the world, in your experience, does most of the world operate with a yes-and mindset? Absolutely not. We're such critical thinkers. We're so used to unpacking and unbundling and deconstructing what's missing that we miss sometimes the opportunities to further things. And it's our mission really to show how yes and can be applied in everything. It's not just a tool for brainstorming or for creative development or anything like that. It's a foundational tool for any relationship where you're trying to forge trust and build momentum and get people on the same page and get some congruence in what you're doing. So yes and is a big deal. It colors everything. It's another idea that we call make accidents work. Again, it's improvisation. We don't know what's going to happen. Dirty little secret about improv, a good portion of it fails. A good portion of it is unwatchable. And yet we've created this entire business model. We've created this entire award-winning theater out of improvisation. And so we're really good at being able to accept failure that comes along the way. We've created a very healthy attitude about failure. Why? Because we create from abundance. We're not precious about any one idea because we know that 17 more are just around the corner. And we're confident that if this idea doesn't work, we can find one that does. And this notion of being perfect and scrubbing things down and filing them down and getting them just right, we think, there's a time and place for that in life. I guess if I'm glad if I ever have to have surgery, I want my surgeon to be precise. I don't want him necessarily or her taking a yes and approach to my surgery. But, I guess we overestimate the number of things that have to go that way. And certainly there's room for more imperfection. Someone said it earlier today, and I really like that. So make accidents work is big. There's a version of that I like too. One of our alums, Rick Thomas, called it fall into the crack in the game. And the crack in the game in our world is when something goes wrong on stage, where you're an actor and you've established in the scene that your name is Rick, and then later in the scene you call yourself Tom, and the entire audience knows that you screwed up. There's a couple of ways you can handle that. That could be a disaster, or that the other actor could save that person and say, "Oh, how did you know my long lost identity or my secret identity?" And saving the situation. So instead of avoiding the accident, instead of papering over it, you make it work for you, and you fall into that crack in the game, and the audience loves it because the audience wants to be in on that co-creation, and they want to know that you can save it even when it goes off the rails. Another idea that I think is really square with everything that I heard today, and it is so powerful, is this notion of being other-directed. Our form of comedy is not stand-up, where a single person comes out and grabs a mic and goes at an audience and kind of almost competes with an audience. Rather, our form is ensemble-based. It's almost like an SNL style thing where you have several actors in a scene. And ensembles become really dependent on each other because they're there to make each other look good. Again, there's no lifeline. There's no idea of where the scene's going to go, and you have to know that everyone has your back. And as a consequence, that if you're struggling with an idea or you're not making a contribution, people want to bail you out. The people in our world who are most revered are the ones who set their partners up for success. They're the rock stars. Going for the laugh line, sometimes it's easy to go for the laugh line and get the laugh yourself. But if you can set the other person up for comedy, for humor, you're even more revered, and people love you for it. So always taking care of your scene partner is really critical. And I think some of the stuff this entire room, I think, understands that. You're implicitly or you're hardwired to be others directed, and you care about, you're sensitive people who care about the well-being of others. So I think that's another reason why this stuff works so well for us. Bring a brick, not a cathedral. What is that all about? In life, in business, I guess I would say even in the theater, and probably in your world too, people feel immense pressure to come up with the entire answer themselves. There's a problem, I got to solve the problem. I'm going to do everything. Or either out of ego that, hey, that's mine, I got it, or out of fear that I'm afraid I can't do anything because I can't possibly solve this whole problem. In this idea of bringing a brick and not a cathedral, in improvisation, the idea is that you don't have to know where the scene's going to go. You don't have to take control of everything else. All you have to do is offer the next idea. And if you're doing that and all of your partners are doing that in a yes-and way, it gets you to a great place. So small contributions matter. Maybe your contribution in a scene is raising an eyebrow. That's it. Maybe you don't say a line at all. Maybe your contribution is much bigger than that. But this notion of take some of the pressure off yourself to create the whole solution. Allow others to create with you and be the kind of person who supports that, and you get much further. We see that speeds, in a business context anyway, when everyone knows that their contribution matters, they're more likely to jump in, right? If you're in a situation where it doesn't matter if I say something or do something or not, it's going to go on its own without me, then they're not going to engage, and we want people to engage. So bringing a brick, not a cathedral, is a big deal. Last thing I want to do, instead of just talking at it, because one of our other principles that I didn't talk about, but I'm violating horribly, is this notion of dialogues versus monologues, and not issuing a monologue like I've been doing for the last few minutes. And this idea of every offering is gift. I want to demonstrate that through an exercise that you're going to do right in your seats. And what I'd like you to do is you're going to turn to a partner to your right or left. You don't have to move at all. And you're going to have a conversation. We're going to do this for about a minute, maybe 90 seconds. You're going to have a conversation about anything at all. I don't care what it is. It's not material. But the only thing you have to do when you're answering your partner, the first thing you have to say, the first thing that everyone has to say before you respond is say the words, thank you. That's it. Super simple. It may be a little nonsensical, but you're going to have that conversation. And before you begin, and this is going to continue through the whole 90 seconds, you're going to start what you have to say with the words, thank you. Ready? And go. All right, so I'm curious, what was that like? Adjectives are fine. Shout them out loud and proud. Awkward. What was it? Silly. Awkward. What else? Difficult. Yeah, how about that? Fun. Thank you. What's that? Engaging. Couple more? Warm. Soothing. Soothing? Like a good moisturizer. Yeah. Hadn't heard that. It's a good one. Is that spirit, does that kind of animate and color the way we deal with people on a day-to-day basis, or is that a little unusual? Yeah, it's unusual. And I think, again, obviously that's not the way we would talk to people in life, and I'm not saying that you should, but the spirit behind it is important. And the idea that sometimes your mere presence in a conversation, your mere contribution, no matter what it is immensely valuable. It doesn't have to be gold. It doesn't have to be brilliant. It doesn't have to solve the problem. It sometimes is just a bridge to a better idea, right? And just the willingness to participate and the willingness to bring a seemingly small contribution and value that the other person's doing it. Sometimes I think we're so in judgment of what others say that it's difficult to feel any spirit of gratitude in exchange. And conversely, we're so in judgment of ourselves that we're not willing to do that. And we don't think that anything we have to say has any validity or importance, so we don't make that contribution. In our world, in our work, it's supremely important. Because if you're improvising and someone's hanging back and not bringing anything, that whatever they have to bring might unlock an idea for you that takes a scene somewhere great, right? So it's truly important. Every offering is a gift, and I would just invite you in your day-to-day interactions with people to think a little bit more about, are you approaching that from a sense of gratitude or a sense of judgment? All right, I want to keep moving on time. So what are we doing in this space? That's a little background on us. So what has Second City been doing? As we look at some of the ideas, some of the tenets that I just unpacked, there's some through lines or connective threads in how improv can connect to wellness. You know, it's about encouraging collaboration and decreasing isolation. It's not a solo sport. When you're improvising, it is by definition an ensemble sport. So you are out of isolation. It's about building confidence. It's about affirming and building and putting you in situations where you're willing to take risk, but only because you know that you're going to be supported by your ensemble. So people feel much more comfortable taking risk, and it builds confidence. Being a good listener is supremely important. It's one thing I never really understood when I came to the company. I thought these guys are just all really funny and they can think on their feet, but they're really good listeners. They have to be able to take that information in and process it and turn it into something cool. So listening is critically important, and support of others. Right? You have to be willing to unconditionally support what anyone else says. That's really important. And creating a safe space for creativity, interaction, and practice. We just don't practice anything. Think about listening, for example. If you want to become a better writer, you can take a writing class. If you want to become a better presenter, you can take a presenting class. If you want to become a better listener, there aren't that many listening classes that I've seen. Yet, what's more important in business, in life, in the work that you do? Listening is critical, and just the idea of putting this stuff into practice is great. So we've been doing that. Some current programs that Second City has taken on. We have an Improv for Anxiety program. It was launched in 2011. We've now worked with over 250 students, and our partner there is, what is that acronym? I'm sorry, it's escaping me now because I don't head that initiative up, but it'll come to me before I go. But the idea of improv might sound to be the most anxiety-inducing thing in the world, but it's been unbelievably therapeutic and unbelievably powerful for the people who've participated. And they've gotten such support and such confidence that it's really enabled them to take those kinds of things on. We've worked with kids on the autism spectrum, learning a little bit more about the connection of our work and the kinds of things we do. What are the therapeutic benefits of that for especially for children on the spectrum? The idea of working with youth at risk, the Jerome Diamond Adolescent Center, that's up in Canada. We've been doing that now for 8 years. So again, creating classes, creating situations where kids can work in an ensemble and find a new way to express themselves. And obviously, the beauty of this entire forum and this entire day is it's about expression. And there are just many different ways of doing it. We've heard in music, in film, in the visual arts, and this is just another way that we do it. Improv for adults with intellectual disabilities, another Canadian thing, and one that just happened recently. We just did a pilot with Northwestern Hospital in Chicago, working with Parkinson's patients. And there's a couple of things, a couple angles around that. And like everything, it's not like some consulting organization came in and showed us this territory that we should go do. What we had was a couple people taking classes who said, this is pretty cool. I've got Parkinson's. I see how this has helped me. Can we do something more with it? So we've taken a very improvisational yes and approach to our own development in this space. But what's really neat about that is it's helped them with some of the physical aspects of it, but also some of the depression that can come with chronic diseases like that, and some of the isolation that they feel and the unwillingness to go out and be with people. And we've just created a situation with Northwestern where they can take these classes and where they can express themselves and connect with other people in a very different way. So we're really proud of all of those things. But it's also just, this is just the early stage for us. We know that there's so much more we can do and want to do, and that's why it's fun for us to come to these kinds of forums and learn what's going on and make ourselves available to the great minds in the room to help out with that. So that's really it is. Where do we go from here? We're asking these kinds of questions. So what kinds of partnerships make sense for us? How do programs get funding? We do a lot of work with corporate clients. Maybe we can find a way to connect a few dots and make some of those things come together. How should we refine curriculum? So in the second point, how do we scale it? So we're really good at the cities where we're in right now, but how do we find a way to take this and empower others so they can carry this forward beyond what we can just touch with our own footprint? And if we do this right, how many lives can improv improve? We see those two words as very connected. And at the end of the day, we want to use this stuff to improve lives. So I hope this just kind of broadened maybe your understanding of what we're up to. We're thrilled at this relationship with Peace Love and so excited that we got a chance to be here today with you and share a little bit about what we're doing. So thank you for your time and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.